Ashley, you're going with the real background today. I'm impressed.
Sometimes it shows up, sometimes it doesn't. I think it's when I log in or when I don't, just click on the link. I don't know, it's different. I haven't figured it out yet.
Gotcha. All right, are we ready?
Yep, we're good to go.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the August 12th meeting of the Chagrin Falls Board of Education. Ms. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin.
Yes.
Mr. Kanzinger.
Here.
Mrs. Brose.
Here.
Mrs. Garvey.
Here.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Here.
Okay, and if you would all join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of
of the United States of
America,
and to the republic
for
which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we're getting better every time. Closer. All right. Okay. Can I have a motion for the approval of minutes, revised June 17th minutes, and then July 8 and July 22?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Mrs. O'Toole, Mr. Kanzinger.
I just want to point out that the revision on the June 17th is because I did not put resolution numbers on the appropriations measures. And the county likes to have those for when they give us the certificates of estimated resources. So I just forgot to put those on there. And then there was a typo on July 8th. The word was supposed to be addiction and it said addition. That's been corrected.
Gotcha. Okay. Any other questions or discussion? All right. Seeing none, Mrs. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin.
Yes.
Mr. Kanzinger.
Yes.
Mrs. Brose.
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
Okay. At this point, we're going to go through board reports, committee updates. If you please give an update of your last meeting and tell when your next meeting is going to be. Appreciate it. Mrs. O'Toole.
Audit committee, we are looking at scheduling a meeting probably next week as the audit will be getting underway. And just to remind everybody, this year, the state will be doing our audit. The state is responsible for all school district audits, but they cannot possibly do all of them. And they release districts from it. We have been released, I think, for the last 10 years. So that contract is up. And so this year we have the state, which will probably mean more work for the treasurer's office, since when you have somebody new coming in, they need probably a little more help and direction and things.
Yeah, to be clear, you said that we were released from the state. That doesn't mean that we didn't have an audit. We did. It just was from a private firm,
yes,
rather than being done by the auditor of state's office. This year, it will be performed by the auditor of state's office. So just want to make that clear.
Good. And that concludes my report for audit committee. Moving on, board policy committee. Tonight we have policies on our agenda, and something we don't typically do is we have a resolution on our agenda to suspend provisions of policy BF, which is our board policy development and adoption regulation. By resolution, we will waive the 2 reading requirement, and so that we can adopt some policies tonight and adopt our handbooks tonight. Not something we typically do. The policies relate to the changes to Title IX by the U.S. Department of Education, which were done in late May. The sample policies came out last week, so and they need to be adopted by August. I don't know if it's the 14th or 16th. So OSBA and our attorneys all recommend you this is one of those instances where you waive the 2 reading requirements. So that is why we have that on in our handbooks. We've been waiting to get updated with all our new information for how we're going back to school. And so we'd like to get those out before waiting for a second reading. And that's what's going on with policy right now.
Great. Thank you for keeping us up with that.
Sure.
It's a tight time. Okay, Mrs. Garvey, if you could take your committees.
Sure. There are no reports tonight for the Business Advisory Board, Capital Planning, or the Board Budget and Finance Committees. At this time, no future meetings have been scheduled.
Okay, I'll follow suit with records retention of no report and no scheduled meetings currently. All right, moving on to the superintendent's report. At this point, I will turn over the meeting to Dr. Hunt.
Good evening. Thank you. Get this going. Everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this evening I'm going to review our operational guide. The presentation will kind of take the same structure as this guide is written in. It's a little over 30 pages with a lot of different links, throughout, providing more clarification. This is a document that we're going to push out to our staff tomorrow, as well as to our parents. So certainly looking for any feedback that you might have on this and adjustments, because we'd like to get out in front of our staff so they can review everything before they return to school, and our parents can start understanding not only what's happening at school, but what they might need to do to help at home. So really the purpose of this document is to provide guidance to our staff and our parents about more of the operational issues of our school district during this pandemic of COVID-19. And I would start with, it's really important that we all share a common goal in safely returning our students to school, and that we do what the community does best, come together to work towards that goal. We talked about that at the end of last meeting, and I think it's going to be critical to our success and everyone taking responsibility, not only at school but at home, to do their things necessary to continue to move into the school year, and hopefully at some point transition to bringing all of our students back. So the guide begins with an overview of our calendar. I reviewed this last board meeting, so I won't spend a lot of time here. I just wanted to highlight again, the board has approved an adjusted calendar. We look to welcome our staff back next Monday. We've got a variety of professional development and time for them to do the necessary work to prepare for rooms, understand protocols, work together to be prepared to welcome our students back. The 25th through the 28th, our principals and staff right now are working on plans to bring in groups of students, reintegrate them into the building, getting them kind of ready to open. And then first official day for majority of our students, grades 1 through 12, is August 31st. So in this PowerPoint, which is linked on our board pack online, as well as on the district webpage, is the calendar for the school year and adjustments that have been made. So I encourage our parents to go online and look at that and make sure they're okay with it, or that they have the accurate copy. As we've talked about, we'll spend some time here tonight. There are 3 learning models that the Board of Education has approved and provided the authority for me to move in between as we kind of progress through this COVID-19 pandemic. There's the all-in model, which all of our students will come in, the hybrid model, and the virtual model. So just to point out and remind everybody, the hybrid model, parents had a choice if they wanted to remain remote in opening of the school year for at least the first semester. They were able to choose that. And then there's the kind of the virtual academy model. That is if we went completely remote as a school district. So just to give you an idea of the numbers, we did extend the opening of registration and letting our parents choose what option they would like. This is not completely accurate. There's a few people that maybe registered for virtual academy that were in preschool, or had IEP service needs that couldn't be met there. So we've worked through those with parents, but by and large, this gives you a general overview of the percentages of students that we're going to land in these models as we open school. We've got about 82% of our student body in the hybrid learning model, and about 18% of our students in the Chagrin Virtual Academy as we open. This is a slide you have seen before as well, and this is the hybrid model at Gurney, and just want to spend just a quick bit of time here. As you know, the encore schedule will rotate through the week for students, so they'll have 5 half days in person for instruction, 5 days half remote instruction, and the split is based on county and location. 4 days of the in-person instruction will focus on literacy and math, and that 5th day will be dedicated to the continuation of encore courses. All remote instruction will focus on science and social studies. And I think what you'll see in the models as they build and go up towards the high school, at Gurney, the online component is more asynchronous, and you'll see a more synchronous face-to-face interactions as we go through in the hybrid model for our students, just based on their age and their ability to kind of self-manage that. It's important to note in all of these models, there are some students that have intervention services or special education services that we need to have them in. So there is a percentage of students that are here all day. So if people look at that hybrid percentage and think, you know, that is the number that's here on a given time, it's actually more than that, because there is a portion of students that are in the school all school day and in each of our buildings. The Chagrin Falls Intermediate School hybrid model is very similar to Gurney. Again, 5 days in person, 5 days with half remote instruction. 4 of the days will focus on literacy and math, and the 5th to encore, just like Gurney. The remote instruction is a little bit different in terms of science and social studies. They'll be delivered by synchronous, so live teachers, where students would have to log in and follow along with the class. And again, some students would be in school all day. So that you'll see that little bit of a difference between the Gurney and intermediate school. The hybrid schedule at the middle school and high school. In fact, I think this time adjusted to a 7:40 start time for students. So when you get your guide, that'll be accurate tomorrow. But this gives you an idea of how our students are going through. At the middle school, we'll have 5 days in-person instruction and 5 half days of remote instruction. Both the high school and the middle school are going to operate on 90-minute instructional periods, Monday through Thursdays. And then students will attend their classes twice a week, once in person, once remotely. But they'll also tune in and follow along when they're not in school. So that instructional time and that synchronous education will be taking place as well. The high school built in a period as well, but the middle school is calling it an advisory period. Again, this is some of the social emotional components that we believe are really important. So we're going to build those in to this time that's dedicated into the middle school schedule. So that's the 90-minute block at the middle school. This is.
Can I just pause there for a second? I've gotten a lot of questions about the synchronous part for both the virtual academy and the hybrid. Can you just speak? So the middle school is the first building where the students will be logging in and learning real time with their peers who are in the classroom and the same teacher. Can you just give a little more detail, or this may be a Mike question too, around technologically what that looks like? Who's being seen on screens, and are they communicating back and forth? And are masks going to be, is there a way to work around masks so that we'll be sure that they can hear each other clearly? I think that's a source of concern for some parents.
Yeah, so you've covered a lot of different components in that one question. So yes, the teachers will have cameras in the classroom. Teachers will kind of, they'll design lessons, and I can't imagine it would look differently. I mean, there may be a time where the camera is strictly focused on the teacher because they're delivering very direct instruction and content in that manner. It may be in a 90-minute block as a teacher design a lesson. You maybe have 20 or 30 minutes of direct instruction, and then you're going to break students out and let them do work. So those students at home would be give an opportunity to, go get your work done at this point. We're going to let you go, and the teacher works in the room. But you could also do some, things like, and I've heard teachers talk about this, they could fire up Zoom, for example, with all of their students, and then group even the students that are not in the room with students in the room to talk. So there's a lot of different ways that we're looking at to integrate that experience. And there will be a learning curve. We've got, the cameras and the equipment coming in, and we're going to train staff next week. And I think, we just need a little bit of patience as we integrate this. But the goal is that if you're at home, especially at the high school, the expectation is you're logging in, you're following along, and you're continuing your education. It doesn't stop because you're not in the building. In terms of masks, I think we'll get to the mask question about what teachers can do if they feel like they're too muffled or they can't be heard. So I'm just gonna maybe press pause on the mask portion of that.
I tag on a clarification for if the student is at home and has a question, how would the teacher know that?
So there's tools to raise your hand in Zoom, and I'm assuming that's one of the methods to do that. That they would raise their hand, or teachers. I mean, they do this every day. They would do kind of a check-in. Okay, how are you? I mean, it's going to be different, and I think that's why this block is a better environment. You've got kind of more time to work through some of those kinks, check in with those groups.
I was just going to chime in too, Dr. Hunt. Mrs. Brose, students in the virtual academy will actually connect to their hybrid counterparts in the intermediate school as well. So it doesn't just start at the middle school, it actually starts all the way down in 4th grade. But and other than that, Bob, I think you hit all the points. I couldn't have said it any better.
Okay. I think I covered high school, very similar to the middle school. They've also built in the Tiger period into the schedule for the various things that they need to do. Link leaders, ACT, SAT prep, college writing of essays, college counseling, social emotional, club activities and meetings. So we're going to try to integrate as much as we can into that time as well. And high school, middle school, very similar in terms of it's very synchronous. Mike, I'm going to turn it over for you for the virtual academy and talk through that. Just let me know when you want to advance the slide.
Sure. So the virtual academy is going to be a combination of both synchronous and asynchronous instruction, very similar to the hybrid model. During the times when the students are connected synchronously, which is, as you guys remember, in sync or live, the focus there will be on literacy and math. At the K-6 level. At 7-12, they'll be connecting to all classes virtually and getting that instruction. Then down independent work, so the asynchronous stuff, they'll continue to work on things like science and social studies at the K-6 level, as well as their iReady pathways and any assigned work in math or literacy from the class. And again, 7-12 is going to continue that rotating content area. Dr. Hunt, if you'll switch to the next slide, I kind of go in a little bit more detail on each building. So Gurney, and in all of these, at Gurney, all of this content is going to be taught by Chagrin Falls teachers. 4 days a week, kids will be connecting during their virtual time slot. So Cuyahoga in the morning, Geauga in the afternoon. Again, the focus there will be on literacy and math. When they're not connected, they'll be working on the same content that their peers will be working on when they're not in school. So that's the science, the social studies, and the iReady pathways. And then at Gurney, there's that 5th day that's dedicated to Encore. That will be asynchronous, and that'll be very similar to what they did in the spring. From the intermediate school, as I mentioned earlier, the remote students will actually join their counterparts for those lessons. So that's where that connection through Zoom will happen. Very similar to Gurney, there'll also be 1 day a week where they'll be focusing on Encore activities. And again, they're going to be joining in. When students are not in school or just at home, the focus there will be on science and social studies, again, taught by a live teacher. So they'll be connecting in with kids who were in the morning or in the afternoon. They'll connect with those kids and they'll learn science and social studies that way. 7-12, it's kind of a different schedule here. The students are tuning in real time to what their teachers are doing. So we adjusted for that 90-minute block schedule. As Dr. Hunt said, Again, they'll connect. There may be a small portion of that in the beginning where they learn direct instruction. And then the teacher may focus on the virtual students while the kids in class work on something, or vice versa. They have the option of pairing those kids together. There's a lot of different models we can take in the 7-12 area. And then just a couple of notes there at the middle school, they've got the Focus Fridays, which is going to add 2 additional instructional periods and elective courses. And then at the high school, the Friday schedule looks a little different, in which all high school students, regardless of what model they're in, will connect and attend their classes through a normal period schedule 1 through 7. So kind of as if they were in an all-in model, only they're all at home and kind of walking through that virtually.
Hey, Mike, have you experimented at all with what sort of echoes you're going to get if 2 kids from the same class are on the same virtual meeting?
If 2 kids from the same class are in the
if they both start up their computer and they both join the same virtual meeting with someone who's remote, you'll get an echo depending on where they are in the room and what the computers pick up.
Sure. So one of the things we're working on in the training next week is really walking the teachers through how to mute everybody very quickly. We're also, like when you guys join, I've got the meeting set to auto mute everybody. So we're kind of working through some of those details. Echo is not terrible, and it's very quick to turn off. But you're right, it is there a little bit.
Should the kids have headphones?
It will help, especially at home. And I think we put that in our plan. I don't have the plan right in front of me, but I believe we do suggest headphones as part of it.
Okay.
I'm 99% sure on that we suggested that in the back to school guide, our operational guide.
Okay.
It's in there. I read it when
I thought I put that in there.
I'm sorry, any other questions for Mike on Virtual Academy? One of the things in the guide as well is a little bit of a conversation about, or a little bit of information, I should say, on how we're going to determine and monitor what model we're going to be in as we move throughout the year. And we spoke about this a little bit last meeting, but essentially we're going to continue to monitor 4 different components. The implementation of our health and safety requirements, is that kind of has to be at the foundation of everything. Those have to be in place. We have to have the appropriate cleaners here, appropriate materials here, PPE for staff. So that it was one element, how effectively we're doing those things, and how well are we doing them on a regular basis. We'll monitor the state advisory system, the number of cases overall, and overall attendance for staff and overall attendance for students. So we'll just walk through this. In terms of implementation, these are the items that we're going to evaluate, and you'll see in the matrix how we do that here in a moment. But essentially, the availability of PPE, the stock and the pipeline for procurement to make sure that we have everything here. The implementation of our mask policy, ensuring that it's consistently being implemented appropriately by students and staff. The temperature checking that we are doing at the buildings. So we talked about this last meeting as well, but we are installing the necessary technology at entry points of the building. So every staff member and every student will have to temperature check on their way into the building. And there's protocols within this guide on if someone were to test high or demonstrate a fever over 100, what would that look like? The building operations, our drop off and our dismissal, that are sanitizing and cleaning. So all of these elements have to be operated, very efficiently, effectively, and consistently, as really they're the basic or the basis for us to effectively run and operate school in a safe manner. The second is the state advisory system, and we've made the decision not to tie to just one of these elements. We're going to evaluate it for both Geauga and Cuyahoga County. We've talked about that. The advisory system, obviously, I think everyone's pretty familiar with the color coding system, but we're also going to look at the dashboard data that is on the state site as well, and monitor that and communicate. If there's a county, where we can look at zip code data and we can look at the information and talk to public health. So all of that will come together for a state advisory system ranking on the matrix. What does that matrix look like? Here's kind of an example of that. So if you look at, across the top, you've got the implementation of the health and safety requirements. How are we doing that? Are we implementing things with fidelity? And a high implementation of all the mitigation factors that would be, indicate that we're in the green there. The advisory system, we would use the colors to help guide us. Cuyahoga and Geauga, obviously if they're in purple, that's just that extensive spread of the disease throughout the community. We would most likely be in a red there and likely be pushing us to a remote model, but you can see how we'll score those things. Prevalence within the district, we're looking at case count, how we can isolate that, the quarantines that we know. We would kind of talk to the health departments on this in terms of determination of pervasive, controlled, or limited, and give that a ranking as well. Then there's that student absentee piece. We've set kind of parameters around that. If you look at the absentee, if you have 90%, typically we're around 96% of our students attending on a regular basis. So we used a 90% threshold. If 90% of our students are attending on a regular 5-day average, we would rate that as green. Attendance rate between 80 and 89, yellow, and then less than 80% would be red. And then you've got a similar rating for staff members as well. The difference between staff members, one of the things that we are concerned about is the sub pool and ability to sub out. So we're also going to look at our fill rates of substitutes and being able to staff up and stay in buildings. So those are the kind of the parameters around the decision-making matrix. The idea as it stands right now is that we would look at this at every other week. We would complete it, talk to the health department, fill this out, bring this back and share it with the Board of Education and have conversations about, what does this data mean and where is this driving us, and, any potential change in format or structure to how we're educating kids. So there's a lot here. I know we've spent a lot of time looking at the different indicators of the different data points, and feel this is kind of the best way to go. I'm going to pause here because this is new for the board. If there's any questions that you might have on this decision-making matrix.
Did you consider looking at this on a daily basis by building and having some sort of, flag system for because I think parents would be interested in knowing, like, okay, the intermediate school has moved from green to yellow for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days.
Well, I think we chose 2 weeks because you want some average data over time. You're going to have spikes in data like attendance. There's going to be days where we have a large number of students out for a specific reason. We're going to have to make decisions on whether we pull that out or not. And then there's just the management of this and doing this work every single day. I mean, I think having it and reviewing it every 2 weeks makes sense. I think trying to keep up with it every single day also may give people a false sense of where this might be headed. So I guess I'd be concerned or steer away from doing this on a daily basis.
What parameters will you use to transition from green to a full day schedule?
I think if we have multiple kind of 2 week periods in a row where we're seeing, a lot of green and yellow, we would have that conversation.
Do you know what's the worst day you had last year in terms of students' attendance because of sickness?
Not because of sickness. I don't know that date off the top of my head, Greg. I would tell you our worst date of attendance are dates before holiday breaks and spring break, but I don't due to illness.
Okay.
So again, I think we articulated some things that we would look at between now and August 31st. And we'll continue to do those. Those will be the drivers until we open schools. Then we're going to transition into this matrix, and we'll continue to update the board on it. We're shooting for, in our internal conversations, that if we made a decision to shift models, in other words, if we feel we've been in really good shape for 4 or 6 weeks, and it's time to go all in or consider all in, we would change that model over, and we try to do that within a week period. So that's kind of our goal and how we would transition.
There was one element you had shared with us at our last meeting with regard to the county health departments issuing an advisory for virtual learning. I don't see it on here. I assume it maybe fits in with the Ohio advisory system column that if both counties were to advise virtual learning, that would cause us to be in the red.
Yeah, I didn't pull everything that's in the operational manual over here. I think that's in the first paragraph that essentially it says if those two counties come out with a recommendation that we need, like Cuyahoga has now, we would move to remote. I did not tie, red alone to going, completely remote. I think we use it as a factor in this decision tree. And we go from there. But any order from the governor or any recommendation from both counties, I think would drive us to immediately go remote.
I saw a metric, I think it was in the Cleveland Clinic back to school presentation, that was like, based on the size of your district, the number of new cases that you should consider to be alarming enough to consider moving remotely or closing down. Do you remember seeing that? I think that might be worth incorporating in. It was like
Jim Nace went through that, and we pulled a few. There was a couple of colleagues I have in Pennsylvania that actually had numbers tied. So they went like, eight cases in this building closes it down, and I'm just using that as a number. And as we talk through this with health department and internally, we felt like everyone, every case is so unique in what that means that using these general terms of pervasive, controlled, and limited is a better route for us to go, certainly on the matrix. I think if you go into the document, and we'll talk about if there's cases or suspected cases, this is going to be, we're going to be walking down the path with the health department, giving us whatever guidance we need.
What will the health department update us on if someone, will they tell us if a student tested positive, or are we relying on the parents to tell us that a student tested positive or they tested positive themselves?
I don't know the specific answer to that, Greg. I
Okay.
can find that out. Chris probably knows that, and I'll probably get a text here in a second. But he's been working directly with them.
Okay.
I do know we have prepared letters if we learn of a positive case or informed of a positive case, how we would notify other parents, and the procedures for that is all in place as well.
And then are you anticipating this to be a district-wide decision or a building level decision? So for example, could Gurney be going all virtual while the high school is still maintaining a hybrid model?
I think that's possible. It's possible that happens. I think if we start experiencing cases, they would probably move through the district fairly quickly. I think we've all been pretty fortunate thus far, obviously looking at our data, but it is possible that if we have, cases in a certain classroom, we can consider a classroom, or a building in isolation, we can certainly do that as well. I guess I look at this as a district decision. This matrix is a district decision to move us to an all-in. People have asked, how do you get there? What are you going to look at? These are the things we're going to do. Any other questions there? Okay. Obviously,
Dr. Hunt, I got the answer to the health department question real quick. The health department is not able to divulge the information on any patient to the school district without parent permission. So that was the answer that I just received.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Obviously, large part of this this document is about safety precautions for students and staff, and this is actually a graphic that was in the reopening of school, and I think it does a good job of kind of simplifying or articulating the things that are most important. So it's A, B, C, D. Always wear a mask. Be aware of symptoms and illness of the illness. Clean your hands and your space, and then the distance and social distance piece. And we have a section on each of these in the Restart operational guide. I'm not going to cover each one. Some of them are self-explanatory, but do want to cover face coverings. We'll be adopting tonight a policy that essentially, covers face masks. We're requiring all students to wear face masks in grades K through 12 in the district. All staff would be wearing face masks as well. This just gives you an idea of what, in terms of what it looks like. And face shields can be worn in certain instances. And I'm going to read directly from the policy. Face shields will be used when a face mask would hinder the learning process, present a health or safety issue, or for those individuals who have difficulty wearing cloth masks. Sharon, going back to your question, if a teacher makes a decision that, I've got 6 or 8 feet in my room, we've got masks on, the kids that are online are having trouble hearing to me, they can make a decision from a teaching learning decision to put on my face shield and, eliminate that muffled sound. So if that issue came out, that's one way a teacher may decide to deal with it. So the face shields are primarily for our staff and kind of addressing some of those issues. All students will wear face masks unless directed by a teacher to do otherwise. What would that mean? What would that look like? That might mean I've got students 3.5 hours. I've been here an hour with my elementary students. We're going to get up and we're going to go take a walk. We're going to socially distance. We're going to get outside, and I'm going to give them a break from their mask and allow them to pull it down and breathe in some air. Or I've got socially distanced in the classroom, and I'm going to allow them to pull it down. That is completely under the discretion of our teachers. But in any high traffic areas in between classes, things of that nature, students will be wearing masks. Anything else or any questions on face masks or shields? I do want to point out and this is also linked to the return operational manual as well. We do anticipate an order coming out from the Ohio Department of Health on K-12 face covering specifically. We've worked through, I know in the policy, I'm to create these requirements, but we worked through this with legal counsel to come up with our guidance, as well as provided it to our teaching staff to get some feedback from union leadership. Any questions on face masks?
I do have a question. I know we have the policy, which is very general, and then we have the guidelines and requirements, which spell all this out. And I noticed it does say that you have to wear a face mask on district property. So how do we, does that mean the second you get out of your car, or do we know how that's going to work? Does this mean everywhere, but outside you really don't have to, or do we?
We will encourage all employees as they kind of get out of their car and start to enter buildings, they'd be wearing their face masks.
Okay. But it also, this applies to visitors and vendors as well, correct?
Yeah. Anyone coming to the school district should anticipate an expectation that you're wearing a mask. And it's not only a state order, but it's, I think it's important. We know it's a critical component of avoiding any kind of spread. So that would be the expectation on school district.
Thank you.
If someone was coming up to use the track, for example, would there be a mask required, or if they're staying 6 feet apart and they're outside?
I believe exercising is excluded from that.
Okay.
I would hope, and the guidance I would ask, from our community, if you're coming up here, you're wearing a mask up until you come here, and when you start exercising, you keep your social distance away from folks, and you do that without your mask, obviously, and you return that mask as soon as you're done, with that exercise.
And can you talk a little bit more about what it would look like for students who are inside the building, and under what circumstances would they not have a mask on?
So there's exceptions in this policy that, for some, health reasons. If you have a student with autism that can't manage the face wear, they could be exempt from the policy. There's an exemption form that people would have to fill out. I think one of the first accommodations we would look to is, if you can't, for health reasons, wear a mask, can you put a shield on? That would be an accommodation we would consider. So there are exceptions that are written into this if people feel they're necessary. just trying to go through. So when facial coverings in school setting are prohibited by law or regulation, so if that were to change, if there's a violation documented in industry standards, that's an exception. When facial coverings are not advisable for health reasons for students, that's an exception. When there's a functional, practical reason for a staff member or volunteer to not wear a facial covering in the workplace. So those are the kind of exceptions that are articulated in the guideline.
And those students will have access to go anywhere in the school without a face covering, correct? Because it's an exception.
Yes, but I think we would do what we needed to do to limit interaction with other students.
Okay.
As best that we could.
That's what I was going to say. The whole hybrid plan is predicated on the idea that the safety of everyone in the buildings is a layered approach, and face masks are a critical component of that layered approach. So we really need parents and students to be in partnership with the district and doing their very best to use the face coverings as much as possible. Between that and the social distancing or physical distancing, that's pretty critical to us, we believe, opening and keeping everyone safe.
Yeah, and you're right. A large driver of hybrid is putting all these protective things in place and doing them well and doing them consistently and demonstrating we can pull that off before trying to bring more kids in where you start to jeopardize your social distance.
Hey, Bob, I have a question. It's not specifically related to face coverings, but you mentioned before, like kind of the desk dividers. Is that still a part of the plan?
It is. So I'll just jump over to social distancing. Obviously, that's a big driver in how many kids students you can bring in the buildings. We are looking to, Gurney has a lot of the extra furniture that was once at the intermediate school. We're pulling out tables, things that typically have been centers or used to put papers or place students at. A lot of that furniture is being removed so we can maximize space within classrooms. Every classroom will have the necessary PPE, cleaning products, hand sanitizer, and dividers will be provided in every classroom as well, Phil. So those are going to be utilized. And again, it's, when we brought UH through, it wasn't like, you have to have a divider. That's the best thing. It was mask is the best thing. You got to have your mask on. Distance is great. That's another layer. And a divider, that's just one more layer. So it's putting as many layers as we can for our staff and students in place to be safe.
So Bob, a student should not be expecting that once they're settled in their seat in their room that they're just going to automatically take off their mask for the rest of the class period. Absolutely not. They should expect, I would imagine across the board, they should be expecting to wear their mask the vast majority of time. Okay. If not the entire time. Just quickly on transportation, we have strived to have one student per seat. Family, siblings can sit together. Mask would be expected before you walk onto the bus. We'll have some of the medical masks available if a student forgets one on a given day. Students will hand sanitize on the way onto the bus and as well as on the way off prior to entering the building. Any transitions, there's not a ton of transitions in the elementaries. Any transition in the high school, in other words, first block to second block, students would be expected to not only have their mask on, obviously, but hand sanitize on the way in and out. And then there would be a midday clean before the next set of students come into a set of desks. So we're working through those schedules right now and how to best deploy staff to pull that off. Probably more detail on that will be forthcoming.
Do you have any guidelines on mask maintenance? Like how often you expect someone to wash the mask?
Yeah, there is.
At what point do you need to get a new mask? That sort of thing.
I think there's some guidance in here, and it might just be on wearing the mask. I'm not sure I have anything. It might be good to include, Greg, if you have something or have seen something to include in the operational guide. I think most of what I have is just how to appropriately wear a mask in here right now.
Right.
I think actually on the previous slide, the last bullet, reusable face shield should be cleaned in and disinfected after each use. Disposables are only used once.
Correct. Yeah, but it just says on a regular basis, if there's any more detail on condition or things you should look for. We did hear from UH, you know, a 1-layer cloth mask is great. Strive to get a 2-layer mask. We've got staff. We're getting on initial cloth mask just because we're back ordered on the kind of a 3-ply cloth mask for our staff as well. So as people are considering options,
Yeah, is there anything like if like the mask breaks or whatever reason and the student needs to dispose of it, is there any special thing they would need to do, or can you just throw it in the trash regularly?
I believe we would put it in the trash and then clean it from there. And then teachers do have additional cloth masks. They will have
Right.
those in classrooms as well.
Okay.
All right. Social distance we talked about. School cleaning and sanitation I talked about already. There's a sanitation cleaning plan provided in the document that people can take a look at as well. There's a flow chart. Jen Banco, who's actually driving back from Miami, did a great job in working on this. We had one from Acton Children's, and then we worked directly with PSI as there are healthcare providers in university hospitals. And these answers some of the questions on, okay, what do I do if I do experience symptoms? And it just walks you through as a parent the questions you should ask in terms of, you know, staying home from school, what do I have to do to return to school? And the same chart can essentially be used for staff in terms of, you know, what my next steps are if I'm developing symptoms. And then, you know, also what if there's a positive case and how that will be handled is in the document as well.
Bob, can you go back a slide?
Yep.
So I know from firsthand experience that it still is very difficult to get testing for anyone under the age of 18. So if I keep my child home with a headache, fever, chills, and a sore throat, and I can't get access to testing, I'm not sure that I can get medical clearance to get them back. That part, is it going to be like lice where they can come to the school nurse and get cleared before they enter the building?
I mean, I think it's important we stick to these protocols. And if those symptoms are ongoing, then it would be I would think at that point, if there was ongoing symptoms, the doctor would order a test. And I don't know, I've been through the same thing right now because we had to have a test taken for my daughter before she went back to college. And you can get those 50-minute tests out at CVS or Rite Aid. You got to schedule in advance. But I think we have to be pretty firm in holding a line to this early on, and then just see kind of how this works out and plays out for our families. So I think we're going to be pretty adamant about these charts as they were developed by the medical professionals and the implementation of it.
Yeah, so I know that the CVS and Rite Aid and Walgreens, all of those, you have to be 18 or older, at least according to their websites. And I just don't know how, I'm just giving a heads up. I don't know that the doctor's office will be providing clearance for cases that are low risk. I think they're still telling people just, stay home and deal with it and assume it's COVID and stay home for 14 days or until the symptoms are gone for 10 days or something like that.
Yeah. And I mean, this isn't perfect by any means. And I think we need to fall on the side, on the conservative side of things. If we're going to, open and stay open effectively. So exposure and positive cases are also in there. And again, I've already spoke to this. This is going to be, in conjunction with the health department in terms of what our next steps need to be and what they will do. One of the things, or what we will do. One of the things I didn't mention is every building does have a room for isolation for any students that are demonstrating symptoms or have demonstrated a fever. They would be put in an isolated room. Parent would be contacted, asked that they be picked up. So those rooms have been identified in each of the buildings.
Is there any exception? I'm sorry. If someone,
Go ahead, Greg.
I'm sorry. If someone tests positive for the antibodies, is there a different rule for them? Or if they've known to have had it? They're gonna, if they get like is that an exception case or no? What are the experts saying about that?
I have not personally talked to them about antibodies, and I have nothing in here that would make an exception for anyone.
What if someone is known to have had it though?
If they've gone through the appropriate, steps in terms of being out of school, not experiencing for.
Yeah, I say they did that, and then they get a cold, or they get headache and diarrhea, and
back through it.
right back, even if they had it. Okay.
Greg, there's no data yet on how long you have resistance after you've already had it. Some things, like some flu bugs, you only have resistance for a few weeks and you can get the flu again. So I don't think there's any scientific data to say that because you have antibodies that you're in the clear for any period of time.
Yeah, I'm asking for, I guess, others. So thank you.
Bob, what if there's more than one student who presents with a fever at Gurney, for example?
Yeah, so we actually talked about having 2 areas. So we're working through the logistics on that right now. And we also will have cleaning protocols on, okay, that student leaves, what happens to that room in preparation for the next one.
Let's hope there's not more than 2, but
Well,
it is something to think about. Do they end up in the same room together, or is there a large enough room and they could be socially distanced from each other?
Yeah, we have looked at, I don't want to commit to these areas yet, but there are areas we're looking at. Can we actually put up, temporary walls, temporary sheeting, and we're getting some feedback on that. So you could actually put multiple students in an area. So I don't have a firm answer on that today. I can only commit that we have one room identified, looking at a second, and then we're also considering or getting some feedback on how we might be able to divide a room to house more folks. Does that answer your question, Catherine?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So, I know we spent some time on this tonight, but again, there's a lot of detail in this document, and I know we've got community members watching. I cannot encourage you enough to take the time to read through this, start to have conversation with your kids about the things that are in it. So there are no surprises. I know we're doing some things at home now with screen time, or if we're riding a certain place, putting masks on kids just to get them kind of used to that and experience and putting it on appropriately for themselves. The more you can do of that in preparation for coming back to school will only make this better for all of us when they get here. And then obviously, we're all role models and practicing these things, not only when they show up at school and on our property, but implementing these things out in the community are really what is going to be, keep us, safe and keep our community safe and moving in the right direction. So I do want to acknowledge the work of the administrative team. I want to thank partners at university hospitals, our partners at PSI. We've had some gentlemen from the clinic as well help us along the way. This has been a tremendous undertaking, trying to put all of this in place and not only articulate it in the documents, but to bring it to life in rooms. There's been a lot of work and collaboration to get it to this point. So I want to thank everybody for that. Also, the link you're going to get is going to be, we kind of consider this a live document. So as we learn and as requirements change, we will make modifications and changes to this, and we'll do our best to highlight and let people know when those things are happening. But please know that this can change as we learn more and as things change with the pandemic. So it's a very, very active document. So if that concludes my overview of this. All of our parents, all of our staff will get this tomorrow morning, and they can start to review it. And we'll certainly be here to answer questions, as I'm sure they'll have some going forward. If there's any other questions of the board, I'd be happy to answer them at this time. And if not, that would conclude my report.
Bob, if you don't mind, I'd like to send you some comments on the face mask guideline link that's embedded in the document that the parents are going to get. I'll send them to you tonight. I just think there's one area that might be a little confusing.
Okay.
Don't want to create any confusion around the mask wearing requirements.
Okay.
All right. Have anything else, Bob?
That concludes my report.
All right, great. Any other questions for Bob before we move on? All right, seeing none, so we move on to audience community participation. I know that I have not received any requests this week for community participation. Did you, Mrs. Brudno? Okay, I took the visual.
I'm muted. I have not.
Okay. And Dr. Hunt?
I have not.
Okay. Gotcha. Moving on then, can I have a motion for consent agenda items 7A through 7W?
So moved.
Thank you, Sharon. Can I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Garvey. Any discussion? Right. Okay. Seeing none, Mrs. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Right.
Mr. Rankin.
Can I ask one question? Just
Sure.
curious, and I know I'm going to say item U, our Kids Link contracts. I notice the price is different. Is that because services are different depending on the student?
I would believe so.
Okay, that would be my guess. Thank you.
Anything else? All right. Ms. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin.
Yes.
Mr. Kanzinger.
Yes.
Mrs. Brose.
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
Okay, great. Moving on to superintendent's recommendations. Can I have a motion for superintendent's recommendation 8A through 8B, skipping C, and 8D through 8N?
So moved.
All right, thanks,
I'll
Greg.
second.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Let's see, Dr. Hunt, if you'd like to speak to these items.
For item A and B, I'd like to thank Colleen and Jack Fishman for their service to the district. Both of them have been bus drivers in our district and have done an exceptional job. Tonight, we're recommending accepting of their resignation for retirement purposes. Item D is a one-year unpaid leave request by Elizabeth Clark per Ohio Revised Code. She's afforded that opportunity, and I'm recommending that be approved. Item E and F are specific to our facility operations office. As the board knows, we are moving away from our Sodexo management contract at the end of this month, and we're transitioning those positions back into the district. This is part of a cost-saving measure that we implemented this spring due to trying to reduce the levy. So we've clearly articulated where we need to be in terms of cost and what we need to save, and believe that we're going to be able to achieve that under this direction. So I'm recommending those two positions. Item G is a replacement, not an addition, a replacement of aide. I'd like to welcome Courtney Mooney to the school district as a 7-hour educational aide, and I'm recommending the board approve that. Item H is a memorandum of understanding regarding live streaming. Appreciate the work of union leadership, Lisa Sires, on working through this to make sure we have the appropriate protections in place for live streaming for our staff. Item I is the resolution to adopt the reopening guide as presented and discussed tonight. Item J is a remote learning plan. This can be a little bit confusing. The state of Ohio requires that we submit a very specific plan based on categories they've identified to be approved for remote learning. We'd originally applied for a blended learning grant, if you knew that, or if you remember that. When they left to go back, and they approved all of the legislation. They didn't clarify that districts could not have a remote and a blended learning plan. So in other words, we could have a hybrid model, but we couldn't offer a remote option. So after getting some clarification, we had to revoke our blended learning plan, file a remote learning plan that also includes blended learning, and it has to be approved and filed with the state. So if that made sense to you, you're better than me, but we need to approve this and get it down to the state before August 31st. Item K is the policy regarding face coverings. And again, please note that could change and modify based on some of the feedback that Ms. Garvey provides. Item L is the revision of the calendar. Item N is the handbooks. Appreciate waiving. We usually do this over the course of 2 readings. These have pushed because we've been waiting to get our policies and procedures in place regarding masks and things of that nature. Open campus at the high school. So we're not only we're going to do this, or I'm asking the board to do this in 1 reading as well for handbooks. And then item N, Mrs. O'Toole spoke about the necessity to approve the Title IX policies prior to August 14th.
Just to clarify, I don't have any changes to the board policy on face masks, just the guidelines that were produced that are part of the opening guide. And again, they're minor, but I think it will help clear up any confusion that might be in there.
Right, that's correct. And currently there was no policy number on that, but the policy number will be policy EBEA. If anyone cares. That's how they get filed in the policy manual.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, Mrs. Brudno, if you could please take the roll.
You're muted.
I know, and then my screen froze and I was trying to click on it, sorry. Mr. Reagan,
Yes.
Mr. Kanzinger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if we could go back to item 8C, please. If I could have a motion for that.
So moved.
Thank you, Catherine. And a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Dr. Hunt?
This recommendation aligns with the 1-year leave that I discussed that is available per Ohio Revised Code. And I'm recommending the board accept a 1-year leave request for Jean Kanziger, high school English teacher.
Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, Mrs. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mr. Kanzinger,
I abstain.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hunt. Moving on to treasurer's recommendation.
I have a very small agenda tonight. Just one then and now certificate on Forecast 5, the analytics portion. It's a software that we purchase from them annually. So I'll need a motion and second, and then if you have any questions.
Okay, can I have a
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any questions from Mrs. Brudno? Is this for like the annual budget forecasting?
This is not the budget one. This is the analytics portion. My lights just kicked back on. This is the analytics portion that we purchase from them. We can run comparisons to other districts in terms of salaries, property values, all kinds of useful stuff for us in managing and being able to isolate areas where, we can compare a specific area of spending to other districts like us and kind of gauge ourselves against other districts, see if there's anything we need to look at. and if there's any areas that we feel like we should improve on.
Gotcha. An annual subscription
Mhm.
fee? Okay, got it. Okay. Any other questions?
Also, just to point out, we did just close the month of July yesterday, so I don't have reports for you for July yet. I will have those at the next meeting. Trying to transition much of that kind of data analysis to me, and so that I have more time to do the analysis. I'm trying to transition some of the entries and the closing and those kinds of things to Jill. So it took us a little longer this month because I'm trying to show her how to run some of these reports and do the things that we need to do to get closed, so that I'll be able to spend more time analyzing the data rather than just throwing them into the reports.
Gotcha. Sounds like a good plan. Ms. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mr. Kanzinger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to other business. Does anybody have any other business to bring up at this time?
I would just wanted to compliment the music department. Their negotiation of the trip that needed to be canceled to New York was, I thought, very fair. And I was impressed and pleased that even those families that didn't buy insurance are able to get a sizable refund on that. And the communication was timely. And so I know that a lot of effort went into canceling that trip, and I'm sure they were incredibly disappointed to have to cancel it, but I thought it was handled very well.
Yeah, agreed.
I would like to add that today the tennis courts officially opened. The girls' tennis team had their first match this afternoon. There was a very small but lovely ribbon cutting ceremony. And in addition to this opening the tennis courts, this kind of concludes our bond project from the intermediate school. This was the last piece of that puzzle. So we can kind of put that in the pretty much done pile, except for the few open items at the intermediate school.
Mary Kay, did you attend?
I did.
Did you get to toss like the first serve or something like that?
I did not. I appropriately social distance in math. I did take a few pictures and shared them with a parent though, so.
That's great. Yeah, I've been by the courts. I mean, they're beautiful, very nice courts.
So, and probably to point out, we've been working with Cuyahoga County on opening of those courts and the baseball batting cage and field as well. So as soon as we have that green light, we will announce that those are open to the public.
Okay, so currently tennis courts and baseball field and batting cage are all still closed to the public?
Yeah, so we're working through opening of those areas as well as our fields at Gurney, kind of currently making sure that we, do it in an appropriate way and have the appropriate things in place for sure.
Do we have signage on all those? I know we have signage on baseball field.
I believe we do. The courts have been actually locked.
Okay. Okay. Any other business?
I do want to acknowledge Mrs. Carolyn Petit. I know that we sent something out to the board and, was on I think Fox News that she was awarded the Presidential Award for science, math, teaching, and computer sciences. And to say that is a huge accomplishment was an understatement. Is not something I've ever seen in any district that I've been in. And it is certainly when the right person gets the award, you feel really good, and the right person got that award. That's who she is, and the things she does for young people should be commended. So I just wanted to share that with the board and publicly.
Absolutely. Great news. Very good recognition. It's a beam of light in this kind of time, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Any other items? Okay, seeing none, our next meeting will be Wednesday, September 2nd, and we will plan to have it in the PAC lobby way, back in person.
I have a question about that. Can we, when we're meeting in person, can we still live stream our meetings or do we just video record them?
We could maybe live stream them. I need to work out a couple details on that, but I think that's possible.
I think we've done such a great job of having parents involved in following what the board's discussing and staying up to date on decisions that are being made. I'd love to see us be able to continue that if possible.
Yeah, I think it would. As I thought about that for a second, I think I know how I would do it, and we could do a similar model to what we've been doing. So I think that should be possible.
I believe there are some districts who have had a portion of their board in person and a portion via Zoom, and they've kind of combined it and live streamed it. So if you want names, Mike, I can find them.
According to the changes made by the legislature, right now we can have virtual meetings or a portion of our people attend virtually through December 1st. It says while the pandemic is going on, or December 1st, I believe is the current way things are worded.
That's correct.
And just some guidance for anyone who might want to attend the meeting. I'm assuming they'll be socially distanced. That's why we're moving to the PAC lobby. They'll be asked to wear a mask, etc.
Thought of all of this yet, but I think we're going to have to put some policies and procedures in place where people would have to probably reach out to the board first because we don't want to exceed the gathering numbers as appropriate. So let us work internally on that and we'll have a communication that goes out.
Okay, thank you. Next, if I could have a motion for executive session.
Yep. In accordance with Ohio Revised Code 121.22, the Chagrin Falls Board of Education will go into executive session for the sole purpose of the consideration of any of the following matters. Employment.
In a second.
I'll second that.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. Ms. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mr. Kanziger,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.